collective intelligence is a term that really begs definition. It's something that, as you know, Doug Engelbart has been promoting for well over 35 years. In fact, we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of his famous Mother of All Demos, as it was termed by Stephen Levy some years ago. And collective intelligence has to do with bringing together people with the use of technology in synergistic ways. Synergy being the term for doing something that has a result and energy that is greater than the sum of its parts.
Is this something new or unusual? Don't many people already do that?
Well, you know, some people ask, isn't collective intelligence just something like collaboration or working together or teamwork? Collective intelligence is more than that. Collective intelligence defines a framework. So in the engineering world, for example, there are many huge projects that are undertaken that without collective intelligence could not happen. For example, any large construction project involves many, many people. Or think about sending a person to the moon, or even launching one of the recent Mars landers. These are all things that involve thousands upon thousands of people. And they must have mechanisms for working together and for accumulating the knowledge that is developed and which they need along the way. All of these are examples of collective intelligence.
Now, in addition to having a common knowledge base and having clear communications, is there anything special that makes it collective? Because presumably any organization that wanted to be successful would want all of the people in the organization to have access to all the information they needed to do their job, and they'd want clear communication. But is there something special about calling it collective intelligence?
Again, the term is an attempt to capture something that goes beyond the simple information needs of large organizations. It's something that's not easy to capture because we have a language of science and engineering that since, about 110 years ago, the time of logical positivism has been focused on that which can be perceived by the senses. And collective intelligence goes a little bit beyond that. I hesitate, as a scientist myself, to talk about things like energy in the sense that people use it in the social context. But collective intelligence very much involves the energy of the group, the energy of a particular effort, and the coming together in a way that takes it above the simple information needs.
Does it take a particular type of culture to enable collective intelligence? For example, people don't judge each other too harshly, they're receptive, they respect each other. Do you need a certain way for people to relate to each other for collective intelligence to work properly?
Well, what a wonderful leading question. Thank you for that. Yes, the characteristics of the people who are involved in collective intelligence efforts, the individual characteristics and attitudes, how they treat each other, are key to successful collective intelligence efforts. Collective intelligence is not per se positive. Collective intelligence could be used negatively. We've heard examples of what is being called collective stupidity as a form of negative collective intelligence. But yes, for successful, positive collective intelligence, it's very important that the individuals who are involved in it have a positive, caring, respectful attitude towards one another, from which comes the willingness to listen uncritically and many other behaviors that contribute to the overall goal of collective intelligence.
Certain big engineering projects are so complicated, like sending a rocket to Mars,
yes,
that you have all the engineers. One little mistake could kill the entire project.
Exactly. And one of the dangers, as we see that happened with the notorious O-ring failure of the shuttle launch, where social pressures prevent people from making or taking into account objective or engineering observations, much to the well, the catastrophic results are well known. And it's hard for us to admit that. But there are, on the other hand, in the engineering world, there are also many positive examples of people rising above that. For example, there's a very famous occurrence, William Le Mesurier. I always have difficulty pronouncing his name. Le Mesurier was one of the leading structural analysts excuse me, of his time. And his firm was responsible for the structural analysis of the Citicorp building in New York. After the construction of the building was actually completed, he got a letter from a graduate student telling him it seems that the analysis had not taken into account the twisting moment of the 100-year winds in the canyons of the downtown New York skyscraper alleys, as they are. And he at first dismissed it as being, well, what does this student know? But after thinking about it, he went back and looked, and sure enough, the possibility of 100-year winds, that is the force of wind that might occur every 100 years, had not been taken into account, and the twisting moment that they would cause had not been taken into account. So the first thing he did was he contacted his insurance company, his liability insurance, and told them that he was going to go to the client and tell them that he had made this mistake. Secondly, he went to the client, to the president of Citicorp, and told him that this mistake had been made and that he was taking personal responsibility for it and that he would do whatever was required, any repairs or anything to compensate for the fact that he hadn't taken this into account. And in point of fact, the repairs did cost a couple $2 million. They had to add bracing as well as an active load to the roof of the building, and it delayed the opening of the building. Le Mesurier, in fact, did take personal responsibility for it. One would expect that subsequently his liability insurance would have gone through the roof. In fact, what the insurance company did is they reduced his insurance payments because they said this was an example of such integrity and honesty that they wanted to hold it up to the world as a magnificent behavior, professional behavior, and a course at MIT holds this as the stellar example.
The question of morality is very interesting because there's a question of who defines what moral standards are and what is the authority behind those moral standards. Can that be determined by collective intelligence, which is essentially kind of consensus thinking?
And I'll take that even a step further, Marty, and say that today, when so many of these issues are international in scope and people are meeting at a level, they may wear similar clothing, they may all be speaking English or some other common language, and yet may come from places where their morality is distinctly different at very important levels, but that are not commonly spoken of publicly. So yes, collective intelligence must be applied in order to surface these issues respectfully and to say that, for me, it may not be a big deal if my right hand has a bandage on it and I shake your hand with my left hand. In some cultures, that could be a devastating insult.
So would a collective intelligence network work best if all the people in that network shared common cultural values?
That's the easy case. In other words, if people come from common cultural values, it's easier for them to create a collective intelligence network. But it is quite possible to have collective intelligence among people of disparate backgrounds. The key to it is transparency. The key is bringing the things to the surface, taking into account people's strengths and weaknesses and particular qualities that derive from their cultural background, their moral backgrounds, and making those public and transparent.